The security guard's hand landed on Marcus Walker's shoulder the way a verdict lands before a trial. Firm, final, already decided. Marcus felt the weight of it travel down his arm, past the elbow into his fingertips where it settled alongside the handle of his son's worn-out suitcase. He did not flinch. He did not turn quickly. He turned the way a man turns when he has been turned before, when he knows the choreography of suspicion because the world has rehearsed it on his body since he was younger than the boy standing next to him. "Sir, we're going to need you to open your bag." The voice was not loud, but it did not need to be. Terminal B of Denver International Airport had its own acoustics, the kind that carried whispers further than shouts. Dozens of passengers slowed their rolling suitcases. A woman in business casual lowered her phone. A father pulled his toddler closer. Everyone heard. Everyone looked, and in that looking, Marcus Walker became what he had always refused to become: a spectacle. If this satisfying story of justice keeps you on the edge of your seat, tap that subscribe button so you never miss the moments that remind us who the real heroes are. Beside him, 11-year-old Jonah Walker stood with his backpack straps gripped in both fists, knuckles tight, jaw tighter. The boy's eyes moved between the security guard and his father with the rapid calculation of a child who understood too much about the mathematics of skin color in public spaces. He wanted to speak. His mouth opened. The words were already forming, sharp and hot and righteous, the kind of words that would feel good leaving and terrible landing. Marcus placed his hand on Jonah's shoulder. Not heavy, not restraining. "Just present, stay calm," Marcus said, his voice so low it barely disturbed the air between them. "Let the truth take its time." Jonah's mouth closed. His eyes did not. 40 feet away, standing near the VIP lounge entrance with a phone pressed to her ear and a panic pressed to her chest, Camille Rhodes watched the scene unfold with the distracted urgency of a woman who had already decided what happened before she saw who it happened to. Her left wrist was bare. The skin where her mother's diamond watch had sat for 11 years felt cold, exposed, almost naked. That watch was not jewelry. It was not a brand statement or a red carpet accessory. It was the last thing her mother had clasped onto her wrist before the cancer took everything else, and now it was gone. And Camille's assistant, Derek, was pointing at the man in the gray hoodie with the old bag, and the world was moving too fast for careful thinking. He was sitting right there. Derek said, his finger still extended toward Marcus. "Right next to your seat. I saw him looking." Camille nodded. She did not ask what Marcus had been looking at. She did not ask if looking was a crime. She was a woman who ran a company with offices in 14 countries, who made decisions in seconds that affected thousands. And right now, the only decision her grief-stricken mind could process was that her mother's watch was gone and someone nearby must have taken it. "Check him," she said. 2 words, that was all it took. Marcus Walker had woken up at 4:15 that morning in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, where the rent was never late but never comfortable either. He worked as a maintenance technician for the city's traffic camera system, a job that required him to climb poles in January wind and crouch in utility boxes during August heat. A job that paid enough to keep Jonah in clothes that fit, and food that was warm but not enough to fly anywhere without planning months in advance. This trip to Denver was not a vacation. Jonah had qualified for the regional student robotics competition, one of only 3 6th graders in the state selected to present their design. The boy had built a small autonomous sensor robot from salvaged parts, circuit boards Marcus brought home from decommissioned traffic units, motors from broken appliances, a chassis cut from aluminum cans that Jonah had flattened and shaped with a patience that made Marcus's chest ache with pride. The robot was not pretty. Its wiring was visible, its frame asymmetrical, its blue sensor eye slightly crooked. But it worked. It navigated obstacles, responded to light changes, and turned toward sound with an accuracy that had stunned the judges at the state qualifier. The plane tickets had cost Marcus $412. He had saved for 5 months, skipping lunches, picking up weekend shifts, monitoring intersection cameras during construction season. The suitcase they brought was older than Jonah, its wheels repaired 3 times with hardware store casters that Marcus had fitted himself in the apartment kitchen, the vinyl patched with electrical tape in places where the fabric had split. Inside the suitcase, wrapped in a towel between folded clothes, was Jonah's robot, each component secured with rubber bands and labeled with masking tape in the boy's careful handwriting. Marcus had packed snacks for both of them: granola bars, apples, peanut butter sandwiches in Wissas paper, 2 bottles of water filled from the kitchen tap. Airport food was $12 for a sandwich that tasted like regret, and Marcus had done the math. Every dollar spent on overpriced terminals was $1 for Jonah's future. At the gate, waiting for their connecting flight, Marcus had chosen seats near the window where Jonah could watch the plane's taxi. The VIP lounge was adjacent, separated by a rope partition and a sense of quiet entitlement. Marcus had not crossed the rope. He had not even leaned toward it. He had sat with his elbows on his knees, watching the terminal the way he watched intersections from his maintenance truck, reading the flow of bodies, the rhythm of movement, the places where patterns broke. This was something Marcus did without thinking about it, the way a musician hears pitch in conversation or a painter sees color, temperature, and shadows. He read crowds. He tracked trajectories. He noticed the person moving against the current, the hand that reached where it should not reach, the eyes that watched without the softness of curiosity. It was a skill he had sharpened years ago in a chapter of his life he rarely opened, a chapter that began at a Greyhound station in Memphis when his younger sister Denise was 15, and a man with clean shoes and a clipboard had tried to walk her out a side door. Marcus had been 23 then. He had been picking Denise up from a school trip, running late, arriving just in time to see his sister's face through the station window, her expression frozen between politeness and terror, the way girls are taught to freeze when danger wears a friendly smile. He had crossed the parking lot in 6 seconds. He had put himself between Denise and the man without touching either of them. The man had disappeared into a crowd that did not know what it had almost witnessed. After that, Marcus spent 3 years volunteering with an anti-trafficking task force that operated at transit hubs, bus stations, train platforms, airports. He learned to read the micro-signals, the adult whose hand rested on a child's shoulder with ownership rather than love, the teenager whose eyes asked for help while their mouth said nothing, the choreography of distraction that traffickers and criminals use to separate vulnerable people from safety. He had helped identify 11 cases. He had testified twice. And then Jonah's mother had left, and Marcus became a single father, and the task force work became too dangerous for a man whose son needed him to come home every night, so he stepped back into the quiet life of camera maintenance and let the skills gather dust. But skills like that do not gather dust. They gather attention. They stay sharp in the background, scanning without permission, noticing without announcement. And today, sitting near the VIP area at Denver International, Marcus Walker's old instincts had noticed something that no one else in the terminal was looking at. Camille Rhodes had arrived at the gate with the practiced efficiency of a woman who lived inside schedules. Her assistant Derek walked 2 steps behind, carrying a leather portfolio and a phone charger. Her bodyguard, a thick-necked man named Gerald, had positioned himself near the lounge entrance, arms crossed, scanning for threats with the blunt attention of a man trained to see fists, not fingers. None of them were watching 7-year-old Ava Rhodes. Ava was small for her age, with braids pulled back in a pink headband and sneakers that lit up with each step, shoes she had picked herself, the one thing her mother had not chosen for brand compatibility. She sat in the seat closest to the window, her legs swinging above the floor, her eyes wide and overstimulated by the noise, the announcements, the engines, the sheer enormity of a world that moved too fast and too loud for a child who preferred quiet corners and coloring books. Camille was on the phone. Camille was always on the phone. The cosmetics company she had built from a single lipstick shade into a global empire required her voice in 4 time zones before breakfast, and Ava had learned to measure her mother's love not in words spoken to her but in the brief moments between calls, when Camille's hand would find the top of her daughter's head and rest there, distracted but warm, like a bookmark holding a page the reader meant to return to but never quite did. At the gate, Ava had asked her mother a question. Marcus heard it because children's voices carry differently than adults. They rise instead of flatten, they climb instead of slide. "Mama, can I go look at the planes? Stay where I can see you, baby." But Camille's eyes were on her phone. The instruction was geographic, not attentional. Stay where I can see you meant stay in the area where I would see you if I looked up, which Camille did not do for the next 11 minutes. Marcus counted. Not because he was watching Camille, because he was watching what was happening around Ava. It began with a coffee. A woman in her mid-30s, brown hair, fitted blazer, walked past Camille's seat carrying a paper cup. The woman's trajectory was slightly wrong, angled 2 degrees too close, the kind of nearness that a traffic camera technician notices because it violates the natural drift pattern of pedestrian flow. The woman bumped Camille's elbow. Coffee splashed across the armrest. Camille gasped, stood, pulled her sleeve back. The woman apologized profusely, producing napkins from her pocket, dabbing at Camille's jacket, her hands quick and practiced and everywhere at once. At the same moment, a man in his 40s, wire-rimmed glasses, khaki pants, bent to pick up papers that had scattered from Camille's assistant's portfolio, papers that Marcus had not seen fall, papers that the man might have released himself from a folder tucked under his arm. The man's hands moved near the floor, near the seat, near the place where Camille's bag rested with its zipper half open. And then the third one, a teenage girl, maybe 16, maybe 17, walked past pulling a small rolling suitcase, her pace casual, her path cutting between the VIP seats and the main terminal flow. She paused near Ava, reaching into her bag, pulling out a small model airplane, the kind sold at airport gift shops for $8, painted silver with blue wings. "Hey, do you like planes?" the girl asked Ava. Ava's face lit up. Someone was talking to her. Someone was looking at her. Not at a phone, not at a watch, not at a portfolio. Marcus saw all three movements simultaneously. The bump, the bend, the lure. Three vectors converging on one target zone. He had seen this choreography before. At bus stations in Memphis, at train platforms in Atlanta, at airport terminals in Chicago, the bump distracts, the bend retrieves, the third person creates separation. Usually the goal was a wallet or a passport, but the third person was not near Camille's bag. The third person was near Camille's daughter. Marcus's stomach turned cold. The watch disappeared in the space between the coffee spill and the paper pickup. Marcus registered this the way a camera registers motion, automatically, peripherally, but his primary attention was locked on Ava. The teenage girl was showing Ava the model airplane, walking slowly toward the corridor that led to the restrooms and the service areas beyond gate B12. Ava was following, 2 steps, 3 steps, her light-up sneakers blinking against the terminal floor. Marcus stood. He took 1 step toward Ava, and that was when Derek, Camille's assistant, looked up from his scattered papers and saw a black man in a gray hoodie moving toward the CEO's daughter. Everything accelerated in the wrong direction. Derek grabbed Gerald's arm. Gerald moved toward Marcus. Camille discovered her watch was missing, and her voice cut through the terminal like a blade through silk, sharp and clean and impossible to ignore. Security arrived. The hand landed on Marcus's shoulder. The bag was demanded. The crowd gathered, and the teenage girl with the model airplane took 2 more steps toward the corridor with Ava following behind her. And no one was watching because everyone was watching Marcus now. The suitcase was open on the floor. Marcus's careful packing was exposed to the fluorescent judgment of strangers. The patched vinyl, the rubber-banded robot parts, the peanut butter sandwiches in wax paper. The security guard pulled items out one by one, and each item told a story that the watching crowd could read however they chose. Either a father who loved his son enough to fix wheels and pack lunches, or a man who did not belong in the vicinity of diamond watches and VIP lounges. Jonah stood next to his father, vibrating with a rage that had no safe outlet. The boy's eyes were wet, not from sadness, but from the specific heat of watching the person you love most be handled like a thing that needed checking. He looked at the passengers who were watching. He looked at the woman who had nodded when security approached. He looked at his father's face, which was calm, which was always calm, which was so calm that Jonah sometimes wanted to shake him and say, "Do you not feel this?" Marcus felt it. He felt every gram of it, but he had learned in 40 years of feeling it that the explosion they expected was the cage they had already built. If he raised his voice, he became the threat they had imagined. If he moved too quickly, he became the danger they had assumed. The only power he had in this moment was the power of stillness, and he wielded it the way a surgeon wields a scalpel, with precision and restraint and a steady hand that cost him everything it did not show. "There's no watch in here," the security guard said, straightening up. His tone carried the faintest note of discomfort, the sound of a man realizing he might be standing on the wrong side of a story. "Check his pockets," Derek said from behind Camille. Marcus looked at Camille for the first time. Their eyes met. He saw a woman who was afraid, not of him. She was afraid of loss, the specific loss of the last object that connected her to a mother she could no longer call. That fear had outrun her judgment, and now it was dragging her toward a place she would not be able to walk back from easily. Marcus could have said many things. He could have said, "You didn't even look at me before you decided." He could have said, "My son is watching." He could have said, "Do you know what this costs?" Not the minutes, not the embarrassment, but the thing it plants in a child's understanding of the world. Instead, he said nothing to Camille. He looked at Jonah. "Don't give them one more wrong story to tell about you." Jonah's jaw trembled, but he still. He stayed quiet. He stayed his father's son. While the security guard completed his search, patting Marcus down with the mechanical thoroughness of procedure, Marcus kept his eyes moving. Not to the crowd, not to Camille. Over the security guard's shoulder, through the glass wall of the optical shop across the corridor, Marcus tracked 3 things at once. He tracked the coffee spill woman who had moved 30 feet from the scene and was now removing her blazer, revealing a different colored shirt underneath. She folded the blazer into a tote bag, transforming her silhouette in under 5 seconds. A person who changes their appearance immediately after a public interaction is a person who expects to be described to authorities. He tracked the paper pickup man who had not left the terminal but had repositioned himself near the exit corridor between gates B10 and B12. The man's hands were in his pockets now, but his weight was on his forward foot, the posture of someone ready to walk quickly when signaled. And he tracked the teenage girl who was now 15 feet from the main seating area, still holding the model airplane, still talking to Ava, still walking slowly toward the service corridor. Ava's pink headband bobbed as she walked, her light-up sneakers flashing in a rhythm that was pulling her further from her mother with every blink. Marcus could not run. Gerald, the bodyguard, was standing 4 feet away, arms crossed, eyes locked on Marcus with the singular focus of a man whose job had been simplified into a single target. The security guard was still holding Marcus's arm. Derek was on his phone, probably calling someone with authority. Moving would confirm every assumption in the room. So Marcus did the only thing he could do. He calculated the robot parts. Jonah's box of robot components was sitting on the floor where the security guard had placed it after removing it from the suitcase. The box was a shoebox, old and soft-cornered, held shut with 2 rubber bands. Inside were 23 components: circuit boards, small motors, wiring harnesses, the blue sensor eye, a battery pack, a handful of screws and mounting brackets. If the box fell, the components would scatter across the polished terminal floor in a radius of roughly 6 feet, creating an obstacle field of small mechanical parts between the current walkway and the corridor where the teenager was leading Ava. Marcus shifted his weight. His elbow caught the edge of the box. It was not an accident. Nothing Marcus did in the next 4 seconds was an accident. The box hit the floor and burst open. Components skittered across the tiles like startled insects. A circuit board spun to a stop near a businessman's shoe. 3 screws rolled toward the window. A motor housing bounced twice and landed directly in the path between Ava and the corridor entrance. And the blue sensor eye, the crooked little lens that was the heart of Jonah's robot, rolled to a gentle stop 2 feet from Ava's light-up sneakers. Ava stopped. She looked down. She saw a small blue eye looking up at her from the floor, and because she was 7 and the world was overwhelming and this tiny thing was interesting and not loud, she crouched down to pick it up. The teenage girl stopped too. Her rhythm broke. She could not pull a child away from a shiny object on the floor without drawing attention, and drawing attention was the one thing her choreography could not survive. "Jonah," Marcus said, his voice carrying just enough. "Show Ava the blue sensor." Jonah looked at his father. The boy's anger was still there, burning in his chest like a coal, but something in his father's voice was different now. Not calm as resignation, calm as instruction. Jonah had heard this voice before in the apartment, when Marcus explained how to read a circuit diagram or how to find the weak point in a broken mechanism. This was his father's working voice. This was the voice that meant, "I need you to do exactly what I say because something depends on it." Jonah moved. He walked to Ava, crouched down, and picked up the blue sensor. He held it up to the light, and the lens caught the fluorescent glow and threw a tiny blue dot onto the floor. "This is the eye," Jonah said. "It can see light changes and tell the robot which way to go." Ava looked at the blue dot on the floor. Then she looked at Jonah. Then she sat down cross-legged on the terminal floor, her back now turned to the teenager with the model airplane, her attention fully captured by a small blue lens and the boy who understood it. The teenager hesitated. She looked toward the paper pickup man near the exit corridor. Something passed between them, a glance, a signal, the silent communication of a plan going wrong. The teenager took 1 step backward, then another. Then she turned and walked toward the restroom, the model airplane disappearing into her bag, her casual pace slightly too fast for someone with nowhere to be. Marcus watched her go. Then he looked at the coffee spill woman who was now standing near a newsstand, her transformed silhouette blending into the browsing crowd. Then he looked at the paper pickup man, who had shifted his weight back, no longer leaning toward the exit, reading the failure of the operation in the teenager's retreat. The security guard finished his search. Marcus's pockets contained a wallet with $47, a house key, a phone with a cracked screen, and a boarding pass for the 2:15 flight to Denver. "He's clean," the guard said. Camille's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: relief that the watch might still be found, confusion about where it had gone if not into this man's pocket, and the first faint shadow of something she was not yet ready to name, something that looked like the beginning of understanding that she had just done a terrible thing to an innocent person in front of his child. "The cameras," Camille said. "Pull the security cameras. They'll show what happened." Marcus spoke for the first time in several minutes. His voice was steady, unhurried, the voice of a man who had spent years reading camera angles from maintenance trucks and utility poles. "You'll want to check the optical shop camera," he said. "Not the one above the seating area." The security guard frowned. "Why?" "The seating area camera is angled for the boarding queue. It catches the tops of heads and the edges of shoulders, but the optical shop has a security camera behind the counter that faces outward through the glass storefront. That glass acts as a partial mirror. You'll get a reflected angle that shows the hands at seat level." Camille stared at him. Derek stared at him. Gerald uncrossed his arms for the first time. "How do you know that?" the security guard asked. "I work with cameras," Marcus said. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. The head of terminal security was a woman named Lieutenant Dreyer, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, the kind of person who had seen enough airport incidents to distrust first impressions. She listened to Marcus's suggestion with the skepticism it deserved and the curiosity it earned. She pulled the optical shop footage. The screen showed a time-stamped grayscale image of the terminal reflected in the shop's glass storefront. The angle was exactly what Marcus had described. Instead of the top of Camille's head, the reflection showed her wrist. The hands of the coffee spill woman were visible, moving across Camille's forearm with the precision of a watchmaker in reverse. In the span of 3 seconds, while napkins dabbed and apologies flowed, the woman's left hand found the clasp of the diamond watch, pressed the release with her thumbnail, and slid the watch off Camille's wrist with a motion so fluid it looked like water running downhill. The next frame showed the woman's hand passing a napkin to the paper pickup man who was crouching near the floor. Inside the napkin, visible in the reflection's angle, was the watch. Lieutenant Dreyer paused the footage. The room was silent. "There's more," Marcus said. He pointed to the edge of the frame where the teenage girl was visible approaching Ava with the model airplane. He explained what he had seen: the 3-person coordination, the bump, the retrieval, the lure. He explained that the coffee spill was not clumsiness but timing. He explained that the scattered papers were not an accident but a stage prop, and he explained that the teenager was not a friendly traveler but the third point of a triangle designed to separate a child from her mother. Camille's face lost its color. She looked across the terminal to where Ava was still sitting on the floor with Jonah, the 2 children now surrounded by scattered robot parts. Ava holding the blue sensor to her eye like a monocle while Jonah explained how circuit boards worked with the serious enthusiasm of a boy who had found someone willing to listen. "She was taking my daughter?" Marcus paused. The question deserved precision, not drama. She was creating distance, whether for ransom, leverage, or something else, I can't say. But the pattern was coordinated. The target wasn't just the watch. Camille's hand went to her mouth. Gerald moved toward Ava with the sudden urgency of a man realizing he had been guarding the wrong person. Derek put his phone down for what might have been the first time in hours. "They're still in the terminal," Marcus said, "but they won't try the main security checkpoint." Lieutenant Dreyer looked at him. "Gate B12 has a service corridor that connects to the baggage handling area. The camera above that corridor entrance was repositioned 6 weeks ago during maintenance. It's shifted 11 degrees to the left, which creates a blind spot against the east wall. Someone who's done reconnaissance on this terminal would know that." Lieutenant Dreyer picked up her radio. There was a part of Marcus that hesitated before sharing this information, not because he doubted it, but because he knew what it would cost to be right. If he was right, he would become a story, and stories about black men in airports were rarely told with the complexity they deserved. He would be the man who caught the thieves, which sounded like a headline but felt like a reduction. He was not a crime stopper. He was a father who noticed things because years ago he had learned the terrible cost of not noticing, but Ava was 7, and the teenager had been walking her toward a corridor, and there were things more important than how the story would be told. 4 minutes later, Lieutenant Dreyer's team intercepted 3 individuals attempting to exit through the service corridor near Gate B12. The coffee spill woman, whose real name was Mara Voss, was carrying the blazer she had removed in a tote bag along with 2 other watches, a passport holder, and a wallet belonging to a passenger who had not yet noticed it was missing. The paper pickup man, identified as Carl Renner, had Camille's diamond watch wrapped in a cloth napkin inside his jacket pocket. The teenager, who gave no name and carried no identification, had in her rolling suitcase 3 model airplanes, a stuffed animal, 2 candy bars, and a prepaid phone with a number that would later be linked to 4 similar operations at airports in Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas. The watch was recovered. It was placed in an evidence bag, photographed, logged, and returned to Camille Rhodes within the hour. She held it in her palm without putting it on. The clasp was intact. The diamonds caught the terminal light and threw tiny fragments of brilliance across her fingers, and Camille stared at them as if she were seeing the watch for the first time, as if the light it cast had changed color. Marcus was repacking his suitcase. He placed each item back with the same care he had packed them that morning. Clothes folded, sandwiches rewrapped, robot parts collected from the floor, and returned to the shoebox. Jonah helped, picking up screws and sorting them by size the way his father had taught him, the meditation of mechanical order that Marcus used to quiet his mind after hard days on utility poles in bad weather. Camille walked toward them. She did not send Derek. She did not send Gerald. She walked alone, which for a woman who had not been without an intermediary in 7 years was its own kind of courage. She stopped 3 feet from Marcus, close enough to be heard, far enough to not presume welcome. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Not a private one, not a quiet one." She turned to face the terminal. Passengers were still watching. Some had been watching the entire time. A few had their phones out. Camille did not lower her voice. "I accused this man without evidence. I allowed my assistant to point at him based on nothing more than proximity and appearance. I did not ask questions. I did not wait. I acted out of fear and bias, and I was wrong. Completely wrong. While I was treating him as a suspect, he was protecting my daughter from a threat I did not even see." The terminal was quiet. Not silent because airports are never silent, but quiet in the way that matters. The conversations paused, the scrolling stopped, the attention gathered and held. Marcus looked at Camille. He saw the effort it cost her. Public vulnerability was not a language she spoke fluently. Her boardrooms were places of control, of curated image, of statements reviewed by legal teams before they left her lips. This was unrehearsed. This was a woman standing in the wreckage of her own assumptions, trying to find words that were not corporate and not rehearsed and not sufficient. Because no words were sufficient, but the act of saying them in public in front of his son mattered more than their perfection. "You don't need to do this," Marcus said quietly. "Yes, I do, and you know I do." He did. He nodded. Jonah stood next to his father, watching Camille with the evaluating gaze of a child who had been taught to listen for what people meant, not just what they said. He was deciding something. Marcus could feel it, the way Jonah's weight shifted, the way his breathing changed, the small physical signals that fathers learn to read, the way technicians learn to read voltage fluctuations. "My dad saw everything," Jonah said. His voice was clear and carried the unvarnished authority of a child who has no interest in diplomacy. "He saw the lady take your watch. He saw the man with the papers. He saw the girl trying to take Ava. He saw all of it. And nobody asked him what he saw. They just searched him." Camille closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were bright. "You're right," she said to Jonah. "Nobody asked, and that's exactly the problem." Marcus put his hand on Jonah's shoulder again. This time the touch was different, not restraint. Pride. "Fear makes people look fast," Marcus said. "But looking fast usually hurts the innocent." Camille held his gaze. The sentence landed in a place where her corporate vocabulary could not reach it, somewhere deeper, somewhere that still remembered what it felt like to be underestimated, to be overlooked, to be a young woman with a lipstick formula and no investors who would take her call. She had forgotten that feeling. Success had insulated her from it so thoroughly that she had become capable of inflicting it on someone else without recognizing it. Across the terminal, a gate attendant announced that the 2:50 flight Denver was delayed by 90 minutes due to mechanical inspection. Passengers groaned. Marcus checked his boarding pass. Jonah checked the time on his father's cracked phone and calculated whether the delay would affect their hotel check-in. Ava appeared at Camille's side, tugging her mother's hand. "Mama, Jonah's robot can see light, he showed me. Can I see it again?" Camille looked down at her daughter. The child's face was open, unguarded, interested in small blue sensors and circuit boards and a boy who explained things without checking his phone. Camille realized with the sudden clarity that comes after crisis that while she had been panicking about a watch, her daughter had been 3 steps from a corridor and she had not noticed. While she had been pointing at a man in a hoodie, her daughter had been led by a stranger and she had not seen. Marcus Walker, detained and searched and publicly accused, had seen what she had missed. He had protected what she had failed to watch. The heirloom on her wrist was diamonds and platinum and her mother's memory. The child holding her hand was breathing and warm and asking to see a robot. "Come sit in the lounge," Camille said to Marcus. "Both of you, please. The flight's delayed and there's food and space for the kids to spread out." Marcus looked at the VIP lounge entrance. The rope partition, the leather chairs visible through frosted glass, the quiet abundance that existed 30 feet from where he had been searched. "We'll come," he said, "but Jonah's not a guest who should be grateful to be let in. We're just 2 people waiting for a plane." Camille heard what he was saying. It was not about the lounge, it was about the frame. He would not walk through that rope as a rescued man, a charity case, a feel-good ending to a story about a woman who had made a mistake and then paid for it with access. He would walk through as a father with a son, equal in the space, owing nothing and owed nothing beyond basic decency. "Of course," Camille said. She did not add anything. She understood that the right thing in this moment was less. The VIP lounge was quiet in the way that money purchases, thick carpet, low music, the hum of a coffee machine that ground beans individually. Marcus chose a table near the window where Jonah could still watch the planes. He set the shoebox of robot parts on the table between 2 leather placemats. Ava climbed into the chair next to Jonah before anyone could direct her. She opened the shoebox lid and peered inside with the wonder of a child discovering a treasure chest. Jonah began pulling out components, explaining each one with the seriousness of a professor and the excitement of a boy who had finally found someone his age who wanted to listen. "This is the motor that turns the wheels. This is the board that tells the motor what to do. This wire connects them. And this," he held up the blue sensor, "is the eye. It's kind of broken because it tilts a little, but my dad says things that are a little broken sometimes see angles that perfect things miss." Ava took the sensor and held it up to her own eye, looking at the lounge through the blue-tinted lens. "Everything looks like the ocean," she said. "That's because the wavelength filter only passes 470 nanometers, Jonah said. Then, catching himself, "I mean, it only lets blue light through." Ava nodded as if she had understood both explanations equally, which in the way of 7-year-olds she possibly had. Marcus watched the children work. They were rebuilding the robot on the lounge table, Jonah guiding Ava's hands as she placed components into the chassis, her small fingers careful with the screws, her tongue poking out in concentration. The robot was becoming something it had not been before, a collaboration. Ava's contributions were not technical but aesthetic. She arranged the wires in color order. She suggested the sensor eye should face slightly upward so the robot looked hopeful. Jonah, who had built the robot alone in a quiet apartment, discovered that building with someone else changed the thing being built. It was still his robot, but it was also becoming theirs. Camille sat down next to Marcus. She did not sit across from him, which would have been an interview. She sat beside him, which was a choice that required trust in peripheral vision, in sharing a view rather than facing off. She did not take out her phone. This was perhaps the most remarkable thing she did all day. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They watched their children build. The terminal sounds were muffled by the lounge walls but not eliminated. A distant announcement about gate changes, the rolling murmur of suitcase wheels, the mechanical heartbeat of an airport doing what airports do, moving people from where they are to where they need to be. "How did you see all of that?" Camille asked finally. The three of them. The coordination, even the camera angle. Marcus considered the question. He could give the short answer, "I work with cameras." He could give the professional answer, "Pattern recognition." But Camille had apologized in public, and something about that act had opened a door that Marcus usually kept bolted. "My sister was almost taken from a bus station when she was 15, he said. Man with a clipboard, clean shoes, friendly smile. "I got there just in time. After that, I spent a few years learning how to see the things that happen in the spaces people don't watch." Camille was quiet for a long moment. "And today, the space nobody was watching was my daughter. Your daughter was the most important thing in that terminal, and the least protected." The words were not an accusation. They were a diagnosis offered the way a technician tells you which wire is frayed, not to blame you for the fraying, but to prevent the short circuit. Camille looked at Ava. The girl was laughing at something Jonah had said, her braids shaking, her light-up sneakers kicking gently against the chair legs. Camille's phone sat face down on the table, its screen dark for the first time since they had entered the airport. "I build a company that tells women they're worth seeing," Camille said, "and I wasn't seeing my own daughter." Marcus did not respond. Some truths need space around them, not commentary. Camille reached down and unclasped the diamond watch from her wrist. She held it for a moment, the weight of it, the memory of it, the 11 years of wearing it like armor against grief. Then she placed it in her handbag, under a silk scarf, out of sight. She reached across the small space between her chair and Ava's and took her daughter's hand. Ava looked up, surprised by the touch, then smiled and squeezed her mother's fingers before returning to the robot's wiring with her free hand. Marcus saw this, the unclasping, the putting away, the choosing of a hand over an heirloom. He understood what it meant because he understood the language of objects and what it costs to set them down. The watch was not gone. It was not abandoned. It was simply no longer the most important thing on Camille's wrist. He smiled slightly, not broadly, not for the audience of the lounge or the story that would be told later. A small smile, quiet as a camera click, private as a father's pride. The gate announcement came 30 minutes later. Flight 215 to Denver now boarding. Marcus closed the shoebox. Jonah carefully placed the blue sensor on top, and Ava patted it once as if saying goodnight to something alive. "Good luck at the competition," Ava said. "Thanks," Jonah said. Then, with the impulsive honesty of an 11-year-old, "My dad was really brave today. He didn't yell at anyone even when they were wrong. I don't think I could do that." Marcus picked up the suitcase with the repaired wheels and the patched vinyl. He held his son's hand, not because Jonah needed guiding, but because sometimes holding a hand is how you tell someone they are the best thing you have ever built. "You will," Marcus said. "When it matters, you will." They walked to the gate. Behind them in the VIP lounge, Camille Rhodes sat with her daughter's hand in hers and her phone face down on the table, and her mother's diamond watch tucked away in a bag where it could rest, just rest, while the things that truly mattered stayed close and warm and visible. Some things can only be found again when people stop looking at what glitters most.